Okay.
It's redemption time. Here we are. I was sick last night with some kind of who knows what disease of gallbladder attack, not sure. And I tuned in for old Mark and Christy to distract me with an exciting live stream from iPad Rehab. And so Mark was doing an EMMC chip-off data recovery, which he normally does. What's your success rate on those?
Close to 100%. I mean, there's been a couple that I have not been able to read, and they're usually phones that are prone to EMMC failure. So, what are you gonna do?
So Mark's super confident, and you've done a lot of testing of what you can and can't do with these chips, and that's kind of really at odds with sort of the way the rest of the data recovery world thinks.
And I thought so too. When I first started getting into this, all the information I read was like, oh my God, you got to use like low melt solder to reball them, and like you cannot heat them more than like 300 degrees or something, or even like that's pushing it.
Right.
And I mean, that's all the information that's out there, and,
right.
and I think that a lot of that comes from the fact that the data sheets are available for these chips.
Yep.
And that's like, they're really, really strict about what you're allowed to do.
Very conservative.
Yeah, very conservative.
Right. I mean, I can remember doing the same thing for Tigris, like looking it up and reading it, and it was like, whoa, Tigris is way more of a pussy than he's ever let on when I've been working with him.
Right.
All right. So so you kind of started doing some experiments after you would recover a chip and then try mess around.
Yeah. So the data's off, it's recovered, it's safe, and now this is a known good EMMC. So let's see what happens.
Right.
And I mean, I've sat there for like an hour straight, reballing it, wipe all the balls off, ball it again, wipe all the balls off, and checking, see if it reads every time. Reads every time.
Have you ever tried to go up to like 500 degrees Celsius?
The highest my station will go is 450.
Okay.
And I don't think I've gone to 400, not 450. I didn't do the 450.
Yeah, because you're a cautious man.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So last night, tell me what happened.
So last night was a big combination of problems. One that I figured out this morning when you brought your MacBook in was that my laptop has decided now, if I'm booted into Linux, it does not even recognize that I have an SD card reader. So there's some sort of Linux drivers problem there that didn't exist, 3 weeks ago, and I've got to figure that out when I get home now so I can keep working.
Okay.
So that's one problem.
How do you feel that the first chip off went? Fine?
I think that went fine. It took a little bit longer than I would prefer, but I was working with equipment that I don't normally work with, so I was being a little conservative with my temperatures at first before upping it. Once I got to the temperature that was right for taking the chip off, then it came off like it should. Right.
Now, we talked before and do a lot in the course about the difference between 400 degrees Celsius that your station tells you, and the way that we teach hot air rework is learning to read the board. And if something says 400 degrees and the solder's not melting, that equals it's not 400 degrees.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the things that I like to see when I pull an EMMC off is that I pull some pads off the board. Because then I know that it never got hot enough to fully melt everything under there. And that's a good sign.
That means you were conservative with the heat enough to get the chip off without damage to the chip, and not so overheated that it made everything liquid so that it came off and preserved the board, because you don't care about the board.
And I can have a hot air station set at 400 or 450 and deliver the amount of heat that I want to the board, regardless of what the number on the thing says.
Right.
And we proved that when we did the iPad Mini
with the Wagner.
With the Wagner, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah. It's all about the experience of reading the situation, which is why I love that soldering video from the 70s, that it's an art and it's
Yeah.
not a science.
Right.
Okay. And everything's gonna be different. Nozzle, angle, you know, every tiny little nuance. So it's really about reading the situation and using your experience to know what you can and can't do.
Yeah, and your nozzle's different every time I use it.
Yes, it is. It's different.
It's a new
lot
shape every time.
when I use it. Exactly. Yeah, I had to go up 5 degrees today after a little I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
Okay, so you felt confident with the chip.
Yeah,
yesterday.
I had no doubt that that was going to read.
Right. And so then when it didn't read, obviously the first thing would be maybe I overlooked something with the chip and the balls. So you looked at it and did it, you know, you kind of seemed like you were questioning some.
I mean, maybe some of them were a little lower than others, and with these readers, the pins don't really stick up that much out of the surface. So, you know, if there is a 50% difference in this bump and this bump, then, you know, maybe one of the pins that needs to be read isn't making good contact.
Right. So your first thought for troubleshooting, and this is what I love about live streaming, it is that people get a chance to see not these spliced together success videos with music in the background.
Yeah.
They're all condensed down so that people can find the answer in 10 minutes. But it's the real world of how people work and how they think and how they troubleshoot. So you felt the chip was good after kind of looking at it. You picked around a little bit. You questioned some lumps and bumps in there. And then second idea was, why don't you put it in my reader?
Yeah, so that was the second idea, and what I noticed today was that your reader is designed to read 2 different types of chips. So I have my good reader here.
So that's your reader.
This is designed to read 3 different types of chips.
Fancy.
Right? So the way that you adjust that is you've got 3 different holes here that you know, you can take the whole socket off and move it up or down, right?
I would have had no idea about
Yeah.
that. How'd you figure that out?
I wondered why there were 3 sets of holes for everything on it, so I took it off and looked, and sure enough, I'll show you. This is what I saw.
All right. Because I mean, honestly, you got one, I got one, and then we kind of decided that you were going to become the Samsung guy. Mine, I've never personally used because I looked at it and was like, this chip doesn't fit in here. I don't know what's, I guess they didn't give me the right adapters or something like that.
So you've got on the socket, you've got an array of pins here.
Okay.
And then on the PCB, you have different sets of pads that, you know, one group of pins is designed to touch these pads, one group is positioned to touch these, and another group is positioned to touch this group over here.
Okay.
Right? So when
is there a word for how those are sold in you know, if you're shopping for these things that you would get? I mean, that's you want the one that
they'll
reads
say
all 3.
that they'll say they're compatible with BGA 162, BGA 169, and BGA 221.
Okay.
So, you know, if I put the socket in this position here, it's set up to read BGA 221.
Okay.
And, or actually that's 162. This position is 169, which is the chip that we're trying to read. And then this position is BGA 221. Okay. So your reader was already positioned at BGA 162.
And that's not the right one.
That is not the right one.
Okay.
So reposition it, and now it should read with your reader as well.
Okay.
And I tested that, and it did.
Great.
Yeah. I tested it with...
I'm sorry for my chargeback, China.
I tested it with my reader in your...
So this is the chip... So this is the first chip that...
yeah, the SanDisk with the voids in it.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the one that I'm making these tests with. And I tested it with my reader that is not this one. The one that's only designed for BGA 169, which is the first one I ever bought years ago.
Right.
And it will not read.
So it's we need to bury it in the backyard?
Yeah, I took it all apart and inspected, and nothing jumps out at me as being a problem.
Yeah.
So.
Was it like the 3D printed style?
Yeah, it was the 3D printed one.
So no metal.
Right.
And
yeah,
so
no metal
you're
besides
kidding.
the pins.
Didn't even last 5 years.
Yeah.
Tell that not to restart. That would be bad.
Uh,
No, don't hit restart. Ah. Oh, geez.
Oh man.
Great.
It may not give us the option because yesterday a message came up and said, we're going to restart you tomorrow. Like, deal with it.
All right, great. That's
So,
great motivation. So
we got
we're gonna speed
15
it up.
minutes left.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
that was the next problem, is that the reader that I was using for a long time now it's done. It's gone. And then yeah.
Okay.
So
what do you want to show? We want to see that piece of shit chip that everybody said, oh, you're scraping it out, it's too hot.
Oh yeah, I know. Oh my god.
You know, Mark's a noob.
All
We
right,
want to
let's
see.
switch over to the
All right,
microscope.
All right.
All
We
right.
want to see.
So we've got the exact same chip with the same. Ooh, oh man, there's a little bit of ground showing right there. That's no good. Oh, a little bit of ground showing over there.
So everyone can't tell that you're being facetious. Why is it not a big deal for ground plane to be exposed?
Because I'm not putting this on a board, so there's pins that are going to touch.
Can't really see it. Move up.
There's pins that are going to touch balls, and they're not going to touch anything else.
Okay.
So.
And if if you were concerned about it, like you were going to put it back to make a working phone, what would you do?
I would cover that with solder mask.
Right.
Yeah.
So and then it would basically be painting the green back on, and that's not a big deal.
So yeah, we got the same chip. It's got the same little voids in it that I was concerned about last night. It's the same SanDisk chip. So I'll switch back to this guy.
Let me wake this guy.
Yeah,
back
wake him up.
This camera is a little tired. There,
All right.
it's working. Yeah.
So I'm gonna put him in the socket.
All right, Joe Ham says that he did an LG V10 EMMC swap once just to see if it would work, and it worked. Same carrier model.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Makes sense. Sounds good.
All right, let's wake this computer up. Okay. Slide it in.
All right, so we have a limited tether.
All right, so I've had to set your MacBook up so that I can read ext2 file systems, which is a bunch of hoops to jump through. But
Did you buy any stock while you were at it? Give me
I
any
didn't.
good trades?
I did not.
Okay.
So I'm going to mount the user data partition.
So how do I know this thing is actually reading? I see a green light. What does it do if it doesn't read? Does that make a green light?
If it doesn't read in a Mac, the green light will flash for a couple of seconds and then go dark, and then flash for a couple of seconds and go dark, and it'll do that 4 times. In Windows,
And then a little middle finger just comes up.
yeah, in Windows or Linux, the green light will stay on for maybe 10 seconds and then go off and nothing.
Okay. So when the green light is on and steady, you know it is that the computer recognizes the reader, or that the chip can be read. Just that the computer recognizes the reader?
You know that the chip is being read when it does that. If you
So
put
solid green light means I can understand that there's a chip in here, there's voltage going to the chip, I'm getting complete circuit, we're ready to read.
yeah, and the computer detects it. You know, you can look in the whatever the equivalent of.
So if I pull this out, my
is.
Mac will say, you ejected the drive without, really shouldn't do that.
It absolutely will.
And does it also pop up a message? And I think you were too high with your soldering temperature. We like to follow the rules. Okay.
Right. So we have the this 57 gig partition of user data mounted. So now I can explore just as if it was a USB
So
drive
you
plugged
see
in.
folders, and they're named.
Yeah, this is the Android root file system.
Okay. And you can get that as long as the chip was unencrypted. You don't need the passcode. This is just reading it off the
Right.
chip.
Yep.
So and is it easy to find? Like, where's the messages? Where's the pictures?
They're stored in SQLite databases.
Mhm.
So it's easy if you know how to do it,
Mhm.
but it's not something that
You can please bro on intro group and
yeah,
get
no.
a one-liner and figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, doubt it.
Okay.
So I mean, you have to have some experience making database queries and that kind of stuff.
Okay. Alrighty. So where are the pictures? Can we see any?
Yeah, those
Is it all
are
nudes?
going to be in media 0, and then DCIM, and then camera, and let's look. Here we go.
Yeah. Let's look. Find something appropriate.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's a
nice little panorama.
Nice panorama.
Like that. That looks like skiing. That looks pretty fun.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a great picture.
Yeah, it really is.
Nice save, Mark. Well done, Marky. Look at you. That is a great picture. Look at the sun on that.
Yeah, nice composition.
Nice, yes. Let's save this guy's data to be my desktop background. All right, so great. So do you always get all of the data, or do the pictures come up with like lines in them sometimes, or anything like that, or is it kind of straightforward?
No, I've never run into any kind of corrupted data on
Okay.
an EMMC chip off.
So it either reads or doesn't read,
Right.
or does a Chris Long.
I've never run into that. So.
What do you think is up with his?
I don't know.
Probably the hot air station, don't you think?
I really want to get my hands on one of those just so I can see.
Yes.
And
Chris Long, just send us one of your goddamn chips.
Send me a Facebook
Yes.
message, or I'll send you one.
We gotta
my address.
help you out. It's too painful to listen to. Okay, so fantastic. So, and how long does this take? Because you had to image that whole thing before you can manipulate it.
Right. Yeah. So the actual, creating the disk image takes, it depends on the size of the memory. If it's like a 16 gig, takes about 20 minutes, and then every 16 gigs
Hold that
more.
microphone a little bit further out.
Every 16 gigs takes about 20 minutes, basically.
Okay. All right. And so then, how much work do you have to do after you get the image? Like, is it hard if they're seeking something specific, like WhatsApp messages or something?
It can be. It can be a little more difficult to go after something besides just pictures and videos, contacts, and text messages.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the stuff like the Samsung memos are stored in a proprietary database format.
Mm-hmm.
So that stuff's locked up a little tighter.
Mm-hmm.
And then app data, it just varies depending. It's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of what's involved when we get requests for specific data that's not just standard pics, contacts,
Mm-hmm.
messages. That requires research every
Mhm.
time because it's nobody asked for the same thing twice.
Mm-hmm. How hard is it to so if we rebulb that chip, would the phone work?
Yeah, I mean you'd have to place a few jumpers, I think.
Get a little mask out.
Well, I mean that maybe it's if we rebulb that chip and put it back on the phone, then there is the potential for the phone to continue working.
All right, here's my question. You have extensive experience mentoring beginning microsolderers in the course. Like
Mhm.
we've just done 4 courses in the last 5 weeks. So in reality, if one of them were to get a data job and they went and ordered one of these readers, would they be able to recover the data, or is that something that that they need to work and be able to really read and understand the hot air? Should they just try to investigate like a JTAG approach to extract the data without having to try to take the chip off?
I think that is a viable option if
Mhm.
you don't have an experience base to draw on.
Mm-hmm.
It's the JTAG, you only use 1 data channel instead of 8.
Mm-hmm.
So that 16 gigs instead of taking 20 minutes takes hours,
Mm-hmm.
and every 16 gigs takes hours. So 64 gigs, that's gonna be a long time of having, you know, all these wires soldered to the board and just letting it sit there and do its thing.
All right. But would it be more feasible for a beginning microsolderer to pursue?
The only technical skills, the only soldering skills necessary to do that successfully would be to attach
Tiny
small
little
wires.
right.
Yeah, small wires to 2 things.
Okay,
all right,
4
we
minutes,
got
50 seconds.
5 minutes left.
We will be restarting.
I love how Windows is just like,
Just
no,
tells
this is what we're
This is
doing.
what's happening. Yeah. So wrap it
You
up.
better strap in. You're in for
Exactly. All right. Well, let's do a few minutes of questions.
All right.
And then we will wrap this up.
Can I switch back to the main camera now?
You can try.
Oh, right. Let's see.
You go look in there. Oh, there you go.
There we go.
Hey, there you go. So I can put this down. Shoo! All right, fantastic. Okay. Here, I'll join you. You're in charge of that. You can make chat be up on that screen.
Oh, right. I got the mouse on it.
You in charge. You the boss, man.
Okay, we want to like scroll up and go through some of the older comments first?
Yeah, see if anybody has any legitimate questions that are valid.
Are we going, how far up do we go? Did I go too far?
Yeah, that was from before. Dance funny man. Okay, go down.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Let's see. Do you guys go drinking? Not today.
No, there's
too
work to
many
do.
macros. Got too much work. All right, go down.
I could give you the mouse.
No, you just scroll down. Scroll. Scroll. Yeah, this
Yes,
is
ma'am.
after Jessa lost her shit.
Okay, all right. Let's get back down.
No, it's before that. I remember seeing the bunch of eyes. That's on this stream. Okay.
Mark, stop,
night.
drop, and roll. That was the end of the last one.
Okay. Hand with Jen. I think that means hang with Jess. Johan says LG EMMC data recovery is his favorite.
Yeah, I love it too. The G4 is like that. Those come off super easy. Like they're.
Yeah, they spiff right up in the reflow oven too. Yeah, there you go. What should I do if I have a bad PCB on a WD Caviar Black 1 terabyte drive?
Probably get a matching PCB and put that on.
I do think that's what they do. They buy,
Yeah.
Like all the data guys are like, this is expensive because every time we have to buy a good one and swap.
If you're trying to fix your drive to get your data, then you buy a matching board and swap it out.
Right.
If you're trying to learn how to fix the board, then you still buy a matching board and then you compare
And then you
measurements
do
to
some
a
diode
new
mode.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Either way, you're buying a new board.
Right. Spectre wants to know what Chris Long's problem is, so do we. Chris needs to watch this. Johan wants to know where he can buy a Dedi Prog socket for the S6 UFS iPad Rehab Supply Store maybe soon. Sounds like a good idea. iPad Rehab Supply Store has got some new stuff in today, super excited about. So I'm going to do some stencil vetting and compare for you guys the 3D stencils versus my favorite stencil versus some of the other janky stencils and really let you see how reballing is so stencil dependent, and then we'll be selling all your kind of reballing supplies so that we can do more reballing of stuff. I got some new tweezers I was using in my last stream and a bunch of like kind of little tools that I think are pretty fun that we're going to be putting up on the supply store. Let's see. Mark, how did you decide which reader to buy and why? Do you need special software to read the chip?
Well, the deciding factor when I got the very first one that is now retired was price. I went with the cheapest. Like, I had no idea.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, that's not... How did Mark pick which reader? He went price, sort by.
Yeah, and then the next one, the one that is in there right now, I chose because it read the most different types of chips, and the socket was metal. Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, early on, you bought the cheap ass plastic 3D printed one. I bought the metal one. Mine worked 0 times, and yours worked out of the gate hundreds of times.
Yeah.
It's bullshit. Right there. Okay. Joe Ham says on his reader, the green light will flash when it reads. So there you go. What else is going on here?
Oh yeah, Paul Daniels is talking about getting back the deleted data. We didn't mention that. Yeah, with
Chris Long says that's a fancy socket. I need a fancy. Apparently you don't.
Well,
the cheap plastic one.
Uh oh.
Uh oh.